Call to order the July 19th, 2012 meeting of the Board of Trustees of Johnson County Community College, and we'll start with the Pledge of Allegiance. I pledge allegiance
to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
And with that, I'll defer to Terry Schlicht for our roll call and recognition of visitors.
We have no visitors at this evening's meeting.
Okay, thank you. It is now time on our agenda for the open forum. The open forum section of the board agenda is a time for members of the community to provide comments to the board. There will be one open forum period during each regularly scheduled board meeting. Comments are limited to 5 minutes unless a significant number of people plan to speak, in which case the chair may limit a person's comments to less than 5 minutes. In order to be recognized, as I mentioned earlier, individuals must register at the door at each board meeting prior to the open forum agenda item. There are no registered speakers for the open forum section of tonight's board agenda. So with that, we will move on to awards and recognitions. And Dr. Reinhardt, do you have anything for us?
I don't.
This could be a really short meeting. Thank you, and I see our favorite lobbyist, Mr. Carter, approaching the podium, and so we'll move to our college lobbyist report.
Thank you, Madam Chairman. I'm glad that you recognize me. It's been a few months since I've been before you, but hopefully you've been reading with interest the reports that I forward over the course of the past several months as the legislature closed. We've had some redistricting proceedings, and now we're in the full swing of campaign season, and I'm sure that your email boxes, your U.S. mailboxes, and your phones are ringing off the hook with requests for support, whether they're robocalls or whether they're the actual candidate or volunteers helping. That's where we find ourselves, and for those of us that sort of take the approach from the entire state, I would have brought the stack of letters that I've received to show you that are all fundraising requests, but I'm trying to keep my fuel mileage down, and it would have taken several crates to bring those letters over here. But that's kind of what's going on right now. There is not a lot going on in Topeka, as many folks are focused right now specifically on the primaries, and there are a number of races across the state, including races here in Johnson County, that will be decided at the primary level before we move on to the races in November. I meet regularly with a group of colleagues and peers to discuss kind of where things are at in the different campaigns. I don't intend to go into specifics this evening, but would be happy to answer any questions should there be any either here or if you want to contact me later. I always include in my report kind of where the state is at with its budget, and I don't do that to be repetitive, but I think it gives us a sense as to where the direction of the conversation is going. This past month's receipts are up yet again, which is good news, not significantly, only about $4.1 million for the month of June, which just adds to that number that we'll have as an ending balance at the end of the fiscal year. The reason I do it is because things like the 1-cent sales tax that produced about $350 million for the bottom line on the budget will be going away. Income tax at the personal level will be reduced across the board. And so we're going to be looking at a different picture this same time next year, and we'll probably be back in the red versus reporting that revenues are up. And so I offer those monthly reports specifically so we can kind of calculate where the political discussion will be going. There will not be a lot of interim committees this summer, simply for the fact that all 165 seats in the legislature are up for election or re-election. However, we will have a few that will make their way through the process, and we'll find out what those are, hopefully either later this month or in August. They will not be occurring until October, November, December type of time frame. One thing that will be occurring, though, that is of interest and potentially affects the bottom line is a legislative post audit, which was recently approved, to take a look at the issues surrounding the machinery and equipment classification system. Several years ago, the legislature changed the way that new purchases for business items were taken into consideration. There has been some dispute as to what is real property and what is personal property in some cases, and so that was actually a fairly large issue that the legislature dodged this year, if you will, and the Legislative Post-Audit Committee will be reviewing that and will likely have a full report ready to go for the 2013 legislature. The reality is it affects the mill levies across the board in counties, not only here but across the state, depending on what types of businesses you have in your area. The only other item that I want to briefly touch on was sort of a Washington, D.C. update. We maintain regular communications with staffers and see our delegates on a regular basis. However, Dr. Sopcich and Kate Allen and I just returned from a quick trip to D.C. To participate in a Kansas Society banquet dinner that occurs annually, where they recognize a Kansan of significance. The reality is we had the opportunity to be in the room with 300 plus folks that are out in D.C. To continue to foster the relationships that we already have and make new connections. We also used the time to stop by our delegate offices and give them updates on what has been going on with items on campus, specifically the groundbreaking that we had ceremonially for the culinary building, but the fact that we anticipate being open for business next fall for that building. And so items like that, as well as updating them on grants that the college has applied for, alerting them to areas where we may be asking for a letter of support from them, or letting them know that should they receive a call from an agency or an organization, they have the information at their fingertips for items that we've applied for as far as grants are concerned. I'd kind of stop there. I've listed a few items that will be occurring on campus as far as public policy type events in my report. I don't need to go into those into detail. And I did attach the documents that we took as leave-behinds or used while we were visiting the delegates in D.C. So, Madam Chair, I'd stop there and answer any questions.
Thank you for your report, and obviously we're always grateful for the time that you spend in Topeka and in D.C. as well, making those connections and keeping us apprised of what's going on. And I'll open it up to the board if there are any questions.
Madam Chair, I don't really have a question for Dick, but again, I think this is the last time we will meet before the primary election. And I think, I'm not going to be partisan, I'm not going to be ideological, but I think if anybody's watching this and somebody comes to their door or makes one of those phone calls that Dick mentioned, I would simply have our county citizens ask them two questions. The first one is, if the tax cuts that were enacted this year result in a $2.7 billion deficit in 3 years and don't spur the enormous growth necessary to repay those cuts, will they raise taxes so that we can have roads, schools, prisons, and social services? I think that's an important question to ask. The second question I would ask them is, if they come to my door, is, do you believe that that Topeka ought to make decisions for the community college or for the school district, or do you think this board elected countywide ought to make those decisions? And that can determine whether or not guns are allowed on campus, whether we make the decision or Topeka makes them, where our funding sources are and how we spend our money. And I think if everybody asks those two questions, then they can make their own judgment as to whether that person running for election ought to receive their vote. Thank you.
Well said, and I would add to that above all, the importance of voting, particularly in a primary election where there's sometimes a reluctance to get out to the polls and vote. But in our area, particularly voting at the primary is sometimes even more important than voting in the general election for local elections. So I would encourage everyone to get out and vote. Any other questions for Mr. Carter?
Madam Chair. Dick, you have a great sense of what's going on around the state, and we obviously have feelings left over from the redistricting around the state and how that impacts various candidates and various parties of belief. Is there any advice you'd give us as to what, I appreciate Trustee Musil's questions, I think they're powerful. Is there anything you would advise from a state perspective as to what we should be seeing, hearing, doing to represent the best interests of the community college?
I don't know that I can add much to the great advice that Trustee Musil provided. The only thing that I would offer that we are seeing, and the question that I would ask is, are we more concerned about the politics of the issue, or are we more concerned about good public policy? And we seem to have strayed away from the dialogue that surrounds good public policy. We can still disagree, but at the end of the day, we need to produce something that we can all agree or at least get along with. We've strayed from that, both in the state and both federally, and we find this divide where there is no discourse, there is no dialogue, and if you don't agree with me, I'm not going to talk to you. And I think that you can figure out how to phrase that question if someone were to come to your door in your own words, but I think that it is critical to the future of our state and to the body politic to ask that type of question.
Thank you, thank you.
Any other questions for Mr. Carter? Thank you very much, and you're looking particularly dapper this evening, I might add.
Thank you. You only see 100 degrees a few months out of the year, so you have to break out the pajamas every now and then to.
Thank you, Mr. Carter. That brings us to our committee reports and recommendations, and we will start with the Management Committee report and recommendations, and Trustee Stewart.
All right. The Management Committee met on July 10th, and we conducted quite a bit of business, some of it just housekeeping, but we have about 11 recommendations to bring forward. And so the first recommendation is on the Management Committee working agenda, and we recommend some changes there to remove some items that have already been addressed and completed, and then take care of at least one redundancy of updating the board on the management budget at the trustee retreat as well as the trustee meeting in the same month. So that's in your packet there on page 1, I think. Page 1. So the first recommendation is the recommendation of the Management Committee that the Board of Trustees approve the fiscal year 2012-2013 Management Committee working agenda is found on pages 1 and 2 on the board packet. And I'll make that motion.
I would second that.
We have a motion and a second. Any discussion? Hearing none, all in favor say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Motion carries.
Moving on is the requirement that we designate an official newspaper for the community college, and Kansas statute requires that. We are recommending, I think it's the same as we did last year with the Legal Record, the Shawnee Dispatch, and the Tri-County News as the official newspapers of the college. And so it's a recommendation of the Management Committee that the Board of Trustees accept the recommendation of college administration to designate the Legal Record, Shawnee Dispatch, and Tri-County News as official newspapers of the college, and that publication constitutes legal notice on behalf of the Board of Trustees, and I'll make that motion.
Second that.
I have a motion and a second. Any discussion?
A question.
Trustee Cook.
Thank you, Chairman Rayl. Do we, I know we also use the website, and is it required that we should also indicate in that motion that we use the website? Or are we going what's legally required, I guess?
I think legally it just refers to newspapers, so I think we're obviously going above and beyond, but hopefully maybe get the legislature at some point to address this issue as the newspapers seem to be dwindling, and that maybe the online version is what ought to stand as legal. So but that's something for the legislature to act on.
Well, we've discussed it a lot. I know that the most current information is online, and I know that we do a nice job at the college of putting all of that information online. And I just asked the question, I guess.
Good question.
Trustee Musil.
A thought on that, since one of our priorities in the legislature was to try to get online notice as official legal notice to save a lot of costs. Do we survey our the folks that respond and find out how many of them actually, I don't know, Mitch, how many of them actually get their notice from the newspapers? Because I would bet it's 0.00 something percent, and it might be good information to have to take to the legislature as more evidence that online and Twitter and Facebook and everything else we do is a better way to do it. Actually give them some information, but just a thought.
And I don't know, do we track that? Mitch, you might be in a position to address that.
Yeah, we started tracking that this past year, so next year we'll have a full year of data to provide for them.
Shocked that they're ahead of me.
Yeah, as Trustee Stewart mentioned, it's really a statutory issue that we're dealing with and not so much what we would prefer to do, so. Any other discussion? Hearing none, all in favor say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Motion carries. Trustee Stewart.
Next item's housekeeping. With the election of our new officers, we need to change our resolution and agreement with UMB Bank, and so that is presented to you on pages 5 through 8. So it's a recommendation of the Management Committee that the Board of Trustees accept the recommendation of the College Administration to approve the UMB Bank Organization Resolution and Agreement for the fiscal year 2013 as shown on the following pages of the board packet.
Second.
And second, any discussion?
But I'll make that motion.
And Trustee Musil?
Second.
Thank you.
Any
I was
discussion?
waiting for Trustee Drummond.
Waiting for him to make a motion. But it works either way.
Hearing no discussion, all in favor say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Motion carries.
Next item is I guess we need to do this, I don't know, is this annual, I guess? The Corporate Certificate of Authority of U.S. Bank for Federal Perkins Loan Program. And so that is in your packet as well, page 10 and 11. And so the motion is a recommendation of the Management Committee that the Board of Trustees accept that recommendation of the College Administration to extend the current banking service agreement and designate U.S. Bank an official depository bank for the Federal Perkins Loan Program for fiscal year 2013, and adopt the Corporate Certificate of Authority as shown on the following pages of the board packet. I'll make that motion.
I'll second.
A motion and a second. Any discussion? Hearing none, all in favor say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Motion carries. Trustee Stewart.
This is another required motion of the notice of public hearing has been completed for the college's budget, and now it must be published by state statute in one of the designated legal newspapers. And so that budget must be filed with the county and the state by August 27, 2012. So that's before you on page 13. I might just highlight, that's a very confusing document, which I've been on the board now about 7 or 8 years. So I've seen this at least that many times that I still have struggle looking at this, that there are things in here that make you believe that we are spending a lot more money than we're spending. And I think that that, again, is required by state statute, which maybe that should be looked at to make this a little more clarified. But I would point to the line total tax levied, which is down towards the bottom, just above assessed valuation. And that is a good indication of what the college has done. And you can see over the last 2 years, and then with the proposed budget, we're going to levy less tax in this coming budget year than we have in the previous 2 years. So I think the college has done a good job of holding the line. We haven't asked for a mill levy increase, and we've worked within the taxing funds that we have. And so I just highlight that on there, and then I'll make the motion. It's recommendation of the Management Committee that the Board of Trustees accept the recommendation of college administration to authorize the publication of the notice of public hearing, 2012-13 budget, and the budget summary subject to adjustment as actual expenditure figures are available. I'll make that motion.
Second.
I have a motion and a second. Any discussion?
Madam Chair, I would just point out that at the very bottom of the chart, you'll see outstanding indebtedness. And if you look at 2010 indebtedness and compare it to 2012, we've made significant progress in reducing our indebtedness at a time when most public entities are increasing their indebtedness. And I think that's a really positive thing for our community and certainly for how we operate the college. And I just wanted to point that out.
Thank you, Trustee Drummond. I think that we probably don't tout this as much as we should of the job that has been done by the administration and this board over the last 5 years of this economic downturn to really live within our means and to keep the doors open and with a high level of quality and actually grow enrollment. And I think we've done a good job of managing that. So.
Any other discussion? I had a brief question, Trustee Stewart. I noticed that the assessed valuation for the proposed budget is lower than 2010 or 2011. I'm assuming that that is an estimated figure that will be adjusted when the true numbers are available. Is that right?
Yes, and I think that, I don't know if Dawn's here, discussions with the county appraiser, the numbers have came in less than what previously we were given. As far as, I think we had a 0.4% increase, and it's actually coming in 0.3 decrease in assessed value. So it's a swing of 0.7%, which is a pretty big swing. That a lot of that is to personal property coming off the tax rolls, and so this will be finalized at some point where they'll give us the final number. But right now, it is less than what we had estimated as given to us by the county appraiser.
Okay, thank you. And I would echo Trustee Dr. Drummond's comments about paying down our debt. I think anytime you can pay down your debt at the same time that you're reducing your overall budget, certainly the efforts of the administration need to be applauded for that as well. So, any other discussion before we take a vote? Hearing none, all in favor say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Motion carries. Trustee Stewart, back to you.
Next item is the renewal of annual contract for housekeeping services, and this is, you recall, last year we started out with the Allied Health Center, OHEC, in Olathe under a contract for outsourced janitorial services, housekeeping services. That has worked well. Since then, we've added West Park, the police building, childcare, horticulture. We'll be adding the WLB, the ATB, and Galileo's Pavilion. And so it seems to be working well there. We've done this through attrition. There have been no layoffs in the housekeeping area. And so this will continue that process that we started back in November. So it is the recommendation of the Management Committee of the Board of Trustees accept the recommendation of College Administration to approve the renewal of the annual contract for housekeeping services with ABM Janitorial Services North Central, Inc. at an annual expenditure not to exceed $411,940.38. I'll make that motion.
Second.
I have a motion and a second. Any discussion?
Madam Chair, I just have one question.
Trustee Weiss.
Mitch, can you tell me that this is the second year that we've been doing this, is that correct?
This will complete a year and a half, actually. We started it in December.
Okay, so we don't have a comparable figure for what this contract was for last year. Would that be true?
Right.
Okay. All right, thank you.
Trustee Musil.
Well, I had a question. It wasn't clear to me how much square footage we were adding, because at some point it becomes really a different bid than was bid last year. Is there, how many, we are adding a number of buildings, how much square footage is being added? Is it double? Is it 50% more? And is the dollar amount of the bid, kind of what Trustee Weiss is getting at, how much is that different from last year?
I don't know the square footage number, but when we bid this last year, we bid the entire campus. So the proposals that we received were based on doing all of the buildings. And since we started with OHEC as a pilot, we've had them propose each additional building. And so far, each of the buildings have come in at a lower price than what they originally proposed.
And did they bid on a per square foot basis, or is it?
Yeah, they knew the square foot for each building, and then they proposed the labor, and then they have included all of the equipment and supplies. So when we add a building, it's per building for the year.
That's helpful to know that there wasn't, it is really a subpart of the bid that was done last year, so everybody had a fair shot at it.
And I know Dana Grove and Rex Hayes are not here today to answer specific questions, but I believe that once these contracts would be issued, it's 13% of the campus of the college's space would be under this contract. So it's still a small number in comparison to the whole college campuses and buildings. And also that I believe that there was a number thrown out that this contract's going to cost us $411, and was it, we've saved $700,000? I hate to
Knew
quote
you were
that
gonna
number,
ask
but
me
there
that.
is a number that,
But
or it would have been $700,000, so there's some significant savings that we've realized from this, and I guess you can't quote me on this since
yeah,
but it was a sizable number that this contract has reduced expense, so.
I had a couple of brief questions for you. This is obviously areas that are available for services because of attrition, so nobody has been laid off. Is there a contemplation that, I know part of the original debate about this issue was the quality of cleaning services that perhaps would be available from a contracted service versus the in-house quality, and is there a contemplation that this is perhaps an opportunity to evaluate the ability of the contracted service to maintain the buildings and the feasibility of doing that long-term, or has that really even been discussed?
I think Rex Hayes, that question was asked in the management committee, and Rex, we asked were there any issues with security or things like that, which was obviously an issue that had been brought up early in that process, that could be a concern. There have been none. I mean, maybe there was one at West Park that they ended up terminating one of the contract people, but it was more of an error on his part in how he did something. It wasn't a security or issue. But that the quality appears to be good. I'm assuming, from Rex, he's probably evaluating this very closely. Probably if you talk to others, they may have different opinion, but certainly from Rex, and I think from Joe, I'll let him speak, that the quality seems to be good and that it's obviously continues to be evaluated. So it's something that's going to be evaluated each year.
Yes, Rex stays on top of this, and he's consistently asked, what's the status, if we had any incidents, things along those lines. And today, Rex is pretty satisfied with it, so the outcomes have been very positive.
Anytime we can save money and,
Yeah.
not have to lay people off and get the same quality of service, I think that's a positive. So, any other discussion? Hearing none, all in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Motion carries. And Trustee Stewart, back to you.
Okay, another item on the agenda is the design-build baseball stadium improvements, and this is a project that is planning and design and construction of the baseball field, renovation of it and related areas, synthetic turf, dugouts, backstop, bullpen, and fencing. And funds from this project come from the Auxiliary Enterprise Fund and the Capital Outlay Fund. And it is the recommendation of the Management Committee that the Board of Trustees accept the recommendation of the College Administration to approve the low proposal of $1,249,995 from Brown Midwest Commercial, plus an additional $125,000 to allow for contingencies for possible unforeseen costs, for a total expenditure not to exceed $1,374,995 for the baseball stadium improvements. I'll make that motion.
Second.
I have a motion and a second. Any discussion? Trustee Cook.
Thank you, Chairman Rayl. Chair Rayl. We had that discussion previously, I'm
We
sorry.
did.
I'm assuming that this will alleviate all of the drainage issues that we have, or are we Band-Aiding something that's a bigger issue?
I think, well, briefly, I think we're Band-Aiding a bigger issue with regard to the slope of the field behind left field. If you stand out in short left field, you'll notice about a 12 to 18-inch drop-off, which is really kind of remarkable. It's amazing no one's been heard out there complaining. So this provides an opportunity to make the field, level the playing field, and also, let's go. And also, it will get almost like a 24/7 usage type of thing. This will be available for other groups in the community, all that, because it's not like we have to maintain the grass and the dirt. So synthetic turf is going to be, it's a real positive addition.
Well, I know we had some issues, we've got some serious issues with drainage, I think, in the old field, and I hope we're relieving that. So, yeah, the AstroTurf is nice, but if we don't have a good foundation, I'm assuming that's being taken care
I
of.
think Carl's in the audience there. Carl, do you know the answer to that?
Absolutely, we'll take care of the drainage
Yeah.
issue. It's a quality, multi-purpose classroom that will be utilized not just for baseball, but a lot of other things that we can do for the community.
Any other discussion? Hearing none, all in favor say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Motion carries.
Next is related, the baseball stadium lighting, a separate contract, and this is to put lighting on that new field. And so it's a recommendation of the management committee, the Board of Trustees accept the recommendation of the college administration to approve the low proposal of $227,032 from Capital Electric Company, Inc., plus an additional $22,703 to allow for contingencies for possible unforeseen costs, for a total expenditure not to exceed $249,735 for baseball stadium lighting, and I'll make that motion.
Second?
I have a motion and a second. Any discussion? Seeing none, all in favor say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Motion carries. Trustee Stewart.
Next is athletic team charter bus service, and this purpose of this RFP is to establish a contract for charter bus services for the college's various athletic teams. And proposers were requested to quote prices for scheduled regular season travel as well as possible postseason travel that hopefully will be necessary as our teams qualify for postseason play. This is funded by the Student Activity Fund. And please note that there are lower bids that are not recommended because the vendors submitted their bid on an all or nothing basis, and we got to piecemeal and pick and choose here. So it is the recommendation of the management committee that the Board of Trustees accept the recommendation of the college administration to approve the lowest acceptable proposals for regular season athletic team charter bus service of $58,898 from White Knight Limousine, Inc., and $22,603 from Crossroad Tours, postseason athletic charter bus service on an as-need basis in the amount not to exceed $18,125 from White Knight Limousine, Inc., and in an amount not to exceed $20,866 for Crossroad Tours, plus an additional $8,150 to allow for contingencies for possible unforeseen costs, for a total expenditure not to exceed $128,642 for athletic team charter bus services. I wish Drummond was still reading these. I'll make that motion.
I have a motion. Do I have a second? I have a motion and a second. Any discussion? Trustee Cook.
Madam Chair, thank you. I'm assuming that we have evaluated all of the safety operations of this, of all companies, so we're just not going on a company that, I realize they're not low in all areas, but to me, safety is more important than the price, as part of the price.
Absolutely. Mitch, how would you word that in an RFP?
Yeah, this was an RFP, it wasn't a bid, so we looked at a lot of criteria, other than just price, and safety was actually the biggest thing we looked at. So they were required to provide certification information, insurance requirements, that sort of thing, so.
Thank you.
Yeah.
Any other discussion? Hearing none, all in favor say aye.
Aye.
Opposed?
Next
Motion
item
carries.
annual contract for telecommunication services at page 24 and 25. And the purpose of this RFP is to contract for telecommunication services. This will provide necessary service to the 2 data centers, including long-distance services, local exchange service, SIP trunk services, and ISDN-PRI services. Denise can answer all those questions about those. And so please note that the lowest bidder is not always selected. The recommendation for award is based on the proposer's ability to effectively meet the college's requirements in a technical and cost-effective manner, including transport and bursting cost. When factoring in the total estimated expenditures for transport and bursting costs, the proposal from Level 3 Communications LLC is the most cost-effective. So it is the recommendation of the Management Committee that the Board of Trustees accept the recommendation of the college administration to approve the lowest acceptable proposal from Level 3 Communications LLC in an amount not to exceed $60,000 for an annual contract for telecommunications services. I will make that motion.
Second.
Have a motion and a second. Any discussion? I noticed there was a considerable disparity between the low bid and the high bid. Does that have to do with the fact that they didn't figure maybe the same things into it, these bursting costs, whatever they are?
The high bid calculated the transport and the bursting costs, and the low bid calculated neither.
Okay, so it's not comparing apples to apples.
It is, that's the problem.
So when you factor those in, Level 3 becomes the lowest.
Any other discussion? Hearing none, all in favor say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Motion carries.
All right, the next item, I think you've all had an opportunity to review this with Mitch and Joe, and it's thresholds for competitive bids and approvals, and it's on page 24 and 25. And the college's competitive bid and approval levels are defined within the Board of Trustees policies 21502 and 21503, and they have not been adjusted or modified since 1994, and with the exception of a minor adjustment 2002 when the threshold for obtaining informal quotes was raised from $1,500 to $2,000. Procurement services, Mitch, went out and surveyed a number of public entities on their levels of approvals and thresholds, and came back with a study on that, and then made recommendations on adjusting our policies. So it is the recommendation of the Management Committee that the Board of Trustees accept the recommendation of the college administration to approve the amendments to Board Policies 21502, 21503, and 21504 as shown on the following pages of the board packet. And I'll make that motion.
Second.
I have a motion and a second. Any discussion?
The only thing I would say is I really appreciate the briefing that Joe and Mitch gave to me, and I think gave to all the trustees about the history of this, and to make the point that just because the thresholds have gone up doesn't mean there isn't scrutiny on everything under that threshold. And they were very good at explaining to me how we take very great care in monitoring all of that through Mitch's department, so that we're not saying, well, none of these aren't going to, these won't get looked at. It's just that some of them won't be brought to different levels.
Yes, the standard of transparency remains the same. I know that's extremely important to trustees.
So it comes through the Management Committee. We see those there, so.
Trustee Weiss.
The only other comment I would like to make, as Trustee Musil mentioned, I appreciate the briefing that Joe and Mitch did, and I was particularly pleased to see, even with these new recommendations, our thresholds are still in the middle of the pack of all the institutions that they surveyed, so I'm very comfortable with it.
Any other discussion? Hearing none, all in favor say aye.
Aye.
Opposed?
I'd-
Motion carries.
Okay, and I'd like to thank the trustees for their due diligence on these recommendations and commend them for the extra effort, and also Joe and Mitch for taking that time and that extra effort to do that. So that's all the, I believe that's all the motions. That's plenty for this meeting. We did have an opportunity to hear from Denise Moore on the status of information services, infrastructure projects. And I would like to highlight that Denise brought the budget in 35 cents under budget for for the year. So that was pretty impressive. I can't remember exactly what the total budget was, but million-some dollars, and she came in 35 cents, so I told them to go out and buy a Coke, but they can't on campus because it's Pepsi campus. So.
Had to get that in, didn't you?
I don't think you can buy one for 35 cents anyways. But thank you for that update, and they've done an outstanding job of updating and enhancing our infrastructure, and those briefings are very, very interesting, and I know there's a lot of balls in the air that they juggle to keep the doors open and keep the phones going, keep the computers going, and I had a lightning strike that affected some things, and so they're always battling something, but thank you for your due diligence and work on that. We also had an opportunity to look at the capital acquisition improvements from Rex Hayes, and we're going to schedule, I think you saw an email from Terry on a tour before next month's board meeting of the Galileo project, Studio 804, so our Galileo's Pavilion. And we'll look forward to seeing that. And no questions, that concludes the management report.
Thank you, Trustee Stewart. That takes us to the Learning Quality Report and Trustee Dr. Weiss.
I'd like to say first that I'm very excited about returning again to Learning Quality Committee, which I believe is one of the most important committees that we have here at the college. Gives a board focus to what we're all here for, which is to provide education to the public. And having said that, the Learning Quality Committee did not meet since the last meeting, so I have no report.
Thank you, Trustee Dr. Weiss. Human Resources Committee meeting, and Trustee Dr. Cook.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Likewise, the Human Resources Committee did not meet in July. I have no report.
Thank you for that. That takes us to the President's recommendations for action, and we'll start with the Treasurer's report, and I'll defer to Trustee Dr. Drummond.
Well, thank you. I happily bring you my last report as treasurer for this past fiscal year, and you'll turn in your packet, if you wish, to page 37, behind tab number 3, and you will see the report. We did spend money, and we did receive money, so I do have a report, but I'll make it very brief. We received a tax distribution, $27 million this past month. It'll reflect in the next month's report. General fund revenues are all up to date with a few slight increases versus the same period a year ago. Expense-wise, we're slightly up, mostly because we elected to spend $3 million to pay down some of our debt early. In addition, auxiliary services are up collectively almost 11% over a year ago. That's about $1.2 million more in revenue than a year before. At the same time, about 60% of this is driven by the bookstore, but nearly every unit on the auxiliary gained some revenue. We are in really good shape, and it is with that I say it's a recommendation of the college administration that the Board of Trustees approve the Treasury report for the month for May 2012, subject to audit, and I make that motion.
Second.
I have a motion and a second. Any discussion? Hearing none, all in favor say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Motion carries. Did you have anything else for us, Dr. Drummond?
No, I just gladly pass baton to Dr. Cook for the next year at least. Thank you.
The next item on the agenda is the President's monthly report to the board, and as we all know, Dr. Callaway is attending to some family members out of town. He's been with us in our thoughts and prayers, certainly, and I expect that he'll be back soon, but in the interim, Dr. Sopcich is sitting in on his stead, and do you have some comments for us?
Absolutely. Stepping in for Dr. Callaway is like stepping in for Prince Fielder, and we know that that's not a good thing. Nevertheless, you have 13 pages in front of you that were specially selected for your review. These represent the accomplishments of our students, faculty, and staff, and as always, there's plenty to go around in those 13 pages. I'm just going to highlight a very few of them. When you look under Academic Affairs, you'll notice that there's a description of several grant applications that are in progress. These include an expansion of the Reverse Articulation Agreement with K-State that we signed earlier, and even the possibility of a consulting contract for building a community college in Pakistan. This represents a real accelerated effort by the grant writing folks under the leadership, I believe, of Marilyn Darcy, who are doing a really good, a great job. If you see look in Dick Carter's report, you'll see a page that summarizes our grant writing. We list the 4 grants, and this is essential when we sit down with the folks in Washington to take them through that, maybe soliciting for their advocacy on those grants, as well as we were also given a very detailed accounting of each grant that's in progress. So thank you very much for making those things happen. Additionally, in the report, there's a detailed accounting of grants over the past year. You'll notice actually in the board packet, there's $5.2 million total that were raised by grant writing last year. So that's quite an effort, and may represent an all-time high for the college. Under Technology Division, our faculty and staff are working with the likes of Black & Veatch, GE Transportation, and Cerner, trying to create more internship and job opportunities for our students. This underscores the role community colleges play in creating employment opportunities for our students. Under Student Success and Engagement, you'll notice a very aggressive recruitment effort that has been and is underway. And lastly, under Workforce, Community, and Economic Development, there is an extensive listing of contracts and contacts, as well as outreach numbers that have been collected by our SBDC. It's so extensive that I can't even begin to talk about it, so I'm going to defer to Dr. Korb here for a few comments.
Well, you can read this, and I'm not going to go through all of these, but I will highlight a couple of things. When you read the list of contacts and contracts that we have, sometimes that doesn't tell the whole story, but the contract that we have with the City of Olathe is a comprehensive supervisory training program, and it's actually a year-long training program. So it's a fairly intensive contract that we did sign with the City of Olathe, so we're kind of excited about that one. Another thing that I don't think it's actually listed in here, but was kind of a neat thing that was an opportunity that came up and kind of highlights how workforce development has an opportunity to be a little bit flexible and maybe do some niche programming. There were some changes in the Title IX regulations, and so, which we needed some additional training for investigators and things like that. So we needed that internally for our own staff, but, and so we had a consultant come in to do that, but at the same time, we ran that through the workforce development area, and we invited other colleges, and we charged them to come as well. Ended up with about 50 people at that Title IX training, which was kind of an exciting thing to do, and it was something that just came up that people were going to need. And we may end up actually and do another one of those because we had some good feedback and some additional colleges that actually needed them. So there were colleges from around the state and this local community that came to that. So that was kind of a neat thing that we did. We have a couple of other initiatives that are working on with Maryland's area that I think kind of highlight how continuing education really can align with and complement the things that we're doing in credit. And one of those is a focus on the developmental student needs. We were pleased that it was kind of identified that we have an exemplary program in continuing ed as far as the developmental courses. And so now we are picking up some of that would have happened on the credit side. We're in the process now of actually aligning those so that those students can come through the continuing education program instead of taking the credit courses. They'll come through the continuing ed program and then transition back to a credit program. So those are just some of the things that are in this list, but you don't necessarily know some of the neat things that are happening.
And lastly, on Monday, Governor Brownback will be on campus. He will be speaking to the Hispanic Business Forum around 10 in the morning. He will be joined by the Secretary of Commerce, Pat George, and the Kansas Hispanic and Latino American Affairs Commission. So it's always good for you to hear that from here rather than in the paper the next day. And in Dick Carter's report, he mentioned that the U.S. Secretary of Commerce was going to be here on Monday as well. This has been an ongoing challenge trying to get this thing scheduled. We're working very closely with BNSF to bring her here to talk about job creation. It was on this morning, but by the afternoon, it seems to be tentative and maybe even off. So hopefully by close of business tomorrow, we'll have a firm understanding of whether this is going to happen or not. We'll make sure if it is happening that you'll know about it. And that concludes the report.
Thank you, Dr. Sopcich. Any questions before we move on? Trustee Weiss.
I'm particularly intrigued by the training that you're providing to Bayer Health Care. And in light of Mr. Carter's comments regarding the Kansas legislature, I'd like to recommend that perhaps the college consider offering a free session to the Kansas legislature when they are back in session in January.
We could do that.
Thank you.
Any other questions for Dr. Sopcich? Moving on, we have no old business. To my knowledge, we have no new business unless someone has something that I'm not aware of. Otherwise, we will move on to reports from our board liaisons. And we'll start with the KACCT report from Trustee Dr. Cook.
Thank you, Madam Chair. The KACCT did not meet since our meeting here on campus in early June, I guess it was, with Dr. Bumpus and his report on the state of the colleges. And while it wasn't a KACCT initiative, I would just say that we had some of our friends in KACCT that we had adopted a kind of an ethics statement at our June meeting and how we're going to operate. And then a couple of weeks later, a couple of schools wanted to, under the guise of KACCT, address the governor's office on some mill levy inequities from their college geographic lines to others. And so we, Dr. Calloway and some others quickly intervened, and that is not a KACCT initiative. So I just bring it to your attention that while we had a couple of schools, and I believe that meeting probably did take place, the last I heard it was going to, but we said that is not a KACCT initiative. It was not what we adopted on our platform in June, and certainly did not coincide with our ethics agreement. So I just wanted to bring that to your attention that was out there working among about 4 or 5 of our friends. Otherwise, I have no report.
Thank you, Dr. Cook. Johnson County Research Triangle report, and Trustee Dr. Weiss.
The Johnson County Research Triangle has not met since our last board meeting, so I have no report, but I would like to draw attention that our next meeting is scheduled for July 30th at 7:30 in the morning. So you have an opportunity to attend it and still get to work at a reasonable time. And it will be held at 4350 Shawnee Mission Parkway in Suite 1238. And I encourage you to attend. It's a open meeting.
Trustee Cook.
Thank you, Chairman, Madam Chair. I'll get that straight. I know that all of you know and saw the publicity, and I realize that JCERT wasn't the sole reason, but the cancer certification for the Cancer Center at KU Edwards is significant. I know we all know that, but it's one of 67 now, I believe, in the nation. And again, JCERT had something to do with that, although not by itself, but it's a tremendous accomplishment.
I would only have to assume that the fact that they got their certification at exactly the same time I came on the board was purely coincidental.
Sure you're right
Aye.
about that, Trustee
Oh,
Weiss.
we voting on that?
Moving right along. Next on the agenda is the report from the Faculty Association. I believe Dr. Williams is here and approaching the podium, so we will anxiously await your comments.
Right. Well, in keeping with the theme this evening, I have a very brief report, and I think everybody will be happy for that. Basically, we're gearing up for the fall semester. There are a couple of officers in the audience. Andrea Broomfield's here, and Ron Palsick is here, so feel free to to say hello after the meeting. Basically, we've been talking about what we want to do with the professional development days schedule. I will be meeting with Larry Reynolds and Andy Anderson, who will be our illustrious MCs again this year at the all-faculty meeting. There was particular interest in a little bit more elaboration about professional development days, the changes that were negotiated, and so we were, myself and Jim McWard, who is a fellow negotiator, was asked to provide some comments specifically about that. But there will also be a panel. The entire negotiation team, hopefully, will be present later on the afternoon of that day to host a forum, an information forum for questions that anyone has regarding the contract, because I have been getting a few questions along the way. And I just think, again, in keeping with the spirit of transparency and opportunities for information transfer, this would be a good opportunity to have everyone in a large room, hopefully, to ask the questions that they have on their minds about this 3-year contract that we negotiated. And there were some nuances to the agreement that may not be as easily understood without that interaction with the negotiation team. So we're going to provide that opportunity during professional development days. I haven't quite locked in the room yet. The day is pretty clearly going to be after the day of the all-faculty meeting in the afternoon, but we haven't located the spot yet, and you'll hear more about that probably later. The other note that I have is that I met with the negotiation team, at least members of the negotiation team. We couldn't assemble everyone together, but we're taking a close look at the Gallagher compensation study that was made recently available to us, and we're looking forward to the opportunity. It's my understanding that the HR committee will meet, and Gail Merriweather will be present to invite comments and questions about that compensation study that wasn't quite available to us in a way to inform negotiations, but we're looking forward to asking questions and looking at ways of possibly implementing or just, understanding what that report does for the faculty phase of the study. So other than that, the only other note that I jotted along the way, I always make notes during the meeting and kind of backing up to under the management reports with regard to housekeeping. I just wrote sustainability along the side because I think one of the initiatives, it's really a force now more than an initiative on our campus. We have a really active group of folks engaged in the sustainability initiative, and one of the things that's happening is a real interest in waste minimization and recycling. And so Michael Ray and those that are assisting with that effort, including the entire faculty and staff on campus, we're all taking more responsibility for recycling, the materials that are recyclable and making a more of a personal effort in disposing of the waste products and so on. So maybe that complements the housekeeping efforts and hopefully not only contributes to the ethic of sustainability, but also helps with the reduction of costs to the college. So I thought I needed to give a shout out to the Sustainability Office and Michael Ray and the folks who are helping make that happen. So that's all I have tonight. If you have any questions, I'd be happy to answer them.
Any questions? Thank you for your report. It must be
Welcome.
the heat. Everyone's keeping their
I
comments.
hear you on that.
Thank you. That brings us to the consent agenda. The consent agenda is a time for the board to consider in one motion a number of different items considered to be of a rather routine nature. We always make it a practice to offer an opportunity for members of the board to pull any of the items for separate consideration if they wish. So at this time, I'll make that opportunity available. Is there anything that we need to pull and consider separately? Trustee Stewart.
Yes, I would like to pull consent agenda item D1, retirements.
And that's under tab 11, is that correct?
Correct.
So we'll pull item D1 on page 69. Did I have that right? From the consent agenda?
Gene Walsh item. That's
It's in the
it's on the
What's in the
addendum. It's the
addendum?
addendum. This is what I'm looking at.
So that's going to be behind tab 12. Behind tab 12, item number 1. Any other items that we need to pull and consider separately? Hearing none, I'll entertain a motion to approve the consent agenda absent item 1 from the Human Resources Addendum behind tab 12.
So moved.
Second?
I have a motion and a second. Any discussion? Hearing none, all in favor say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Motion carries. And do we have some discussion surrounding the item that's been pulled?
Yes. I just wanted to make sure that, had an opportunity to comment on Jean Walsh and thank her for her service to the college. I had an opportunity to work fairly closely with her when I first joined the board, and she built a wonderful nursing program. She oversaw that as it's a first-class program, and also then the bringing on the OHEC, the Allied Health Training Building out in Olathe. So some great accomplishments, and I just wanted to make sure that we commended her for that and thank her for her service and wish her a wonderful retirement. So that's the only purpose of that.
It's always with mixed feelings that we see these retirements show up on the agenda, because while we wish Jean and the folks who have come before her and will certainly follow her in retirement well, it's always difficult to lose folks who have brought so much to the institution. So I will entertain a motion for approval of item 1 of the Human Resources Addendum at this time.
So moved.
Second.
I have a motion and a second. Any further discussion?
Dr. Sopcich, would you make sure that Jean Walsh has that information, that she was commended? Thank you.
Anything else? Hearing none, all in favor say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Motion carries. It's my understanding we have nothing for an executive session, and so with that, in record time, we stand adjourned.